Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing our Let's Talk Lore series covering the Nanman expedition with episode 8 titled The Seventh Capture. So last episode, we left off as Meng Huo was taken prisoner inside his own home in the Silver Pit Caves by Zhuge Liang for the 6th time. And when asked if he was willing to accept defeat this time, Meng Huo responds, "We gambled and walked into your trap here when we were never captured on the battlefield, so I'm unwilling to admit defeat." Meng Huo continues, "But if you let us go and capture us for a 7th time, then we will definitely bend the knee." Zhuge Liang laughs and orders the guard to untie Meng Huo and tells him, "I have taken your home now and beaten you again and again, so I'm not afraid to let you go. But if you still resist after a 7th capture, then I will be forced to take harsher actions." With that said, Meng Huo and his party of around roughly 1,000 survivors were released. And as Meng Huo's party wandered farther south and gathered up more of their scattered forces, they stopped to make plans as they were now homeless wanderers. And during this meeting, Meng Huo's brother-in-law, Dai Lai, once again made a suggestion. Dai Lai claims that the only place in the south that can alter their fortunes is the kingdom of Wuge, 700 kilometers to the southeast. There lives a king named Wutugu, who is unnaturally tall and is well known to eat only snakes and other exotic animal meats for nourishment. His armies also wear the famous vine armor that is produced by the Wuge people by collecting vines from cliffs and then soaking them in oil for over half of a year before exposing them to the sun to dry, and then the process is repeated again and again for more than 10 times before the vine can be deemed worthy to be used in crafting the armor, which is impervious to any sword strike or arrow. And an added benefit of these vine armor is that they now float in water, so troops can use their own armor as life vests to cross rivers as well. If we can secure their help, then maybe we can beat back Zhuge Liang's forces and retake our cave. So Meng Huo and their party traveled south and sought the help of King Wutugu, who was glad to receive them and help them repel the invading Shu Han forces. So Wutugu summons his 30,000 vine armor units and marches his army north to a river named the Peach Blossom River, where he made his camp. Wutugu explains to Meng Huo that this river is native to their land, and that their people grew up drinking this water, which helps refresh them. But if an outsider like yourself or the Shu Han force drink from it, it will make them sick. So this would be the perfect place for us to set up camp. Back on the Shu Han side, Zhuge Liang's scouts have already reported back the whereabouts of Meng Huo's party, so Zhuge Liang moves camp once again to face off against Meng Huo and his new ally Wutugu. But when the Shu Han force arrived at the Peach Blossom River, locals captured by scouts provided them intel on the river itself, so in order to preserve a fresh water source for the army, Zhuge Liang decides to move their camp back 5 kilometers from the river so they can dig wells for water, much like how they approached the 4 poisonous springs outside of Bald Dragon Cave. So on the next day, Wutugu and his army of vine armor units crossed the river using their armor and assaulted the Shu Han camp. Wei Yan's force came out in response, but when the Shu Han arrows and weapons failed to make a dent on the enemy armor, the army panicked and routed back to camp. And by the time Wei Yan re-emerged from camp with heavy cavalry units this time, the enemy had long retreated using their armor as flotation device again. Deflated by this defeat, Wei Yan meets up with Zhuge Liang to report back on the armor situation. Having never dealt with vine armor before, Zhuge Liang summons Lü Kai, the mapmaker, to see if he had any more information about this region. And Lü Kai informs him that he has heard tales of this fabled kingdom where the people grew up drinking from local water sources that are harmful to all intruders, and how they specialize in crafting an armor that floats in water but is also indestructible on the battlefield. Lü Kai laments that with enemies like this, maybe it is best to end the campaign, as Meng Huo had already been soundly defeated and even lost his home. Zhuge Liang laughs and replies, "We have been through so many difficulties to reach this point. How can we abandon this campaign now with our prize in sight? Give me a day and I'll have a plan. For now, Zhao Yun and Wei Yan will increase our fortifications at camp and hold a defensive position." So on the next day, with locals as guides, Zhuge Liang took his mobile war cart for a stroll along the nearby areas to survey the terrain and to observe the enemy camp. As they survey the north bank of the Peach Blossom River, they spot a long, narrow valley with almost no vegetation inside. When Zhuge Liang asked the locals about this valley, they inform him that this is known as the Coiled Snake Valley, and it leads all the way back to the north bank of the Peach Blossom River to the south, and to the north it leads to the Sanjiang city near the Silver Pit Caves. Hearing this, Zhuge Liang is delighted as he returns to camp to make plans. First, he summons Ma Dai to retrieve the 10 black carts from the military supply depot and transport them into the middle of the valley. Then directions to prepare these carts were given to Ma Dai secretly, as his men were ordered to seal off the valley on both sides to prepare for the trap for the next 15 days. Then Zhuge Liang summons Zhao Yun, who was sent back to the Silver Pit Caves to defend that end of the valley, while Wei Yan was summoned to make camp at the crossing directly next to the Peach Blossom River, and his direction was that if the enemy comes to attack, then Wei Yan must lose and retreat to white flags that will be placed for him. And Zhuge Liang promises him that where the flags are will be new camps ready for him to defend. But if the enemy come attack again, then he must lose again and retreat to the next white flag. By no means is he allowed to win or even fight back. And the goal here is to lose 15 times and forfeit up to 7 camps over the course of the next 15 days. And even though Wei Yan is unhappy to receive such an assignment, he grudgingly accepts as he moves his force out to the river to construct their first camp. Then Zhuge Liang summons Zhang Yi, who was still recovering from his wounds suffered at the hand of Zhuo Rong's daggers, to lay out a plan for the white flag placements and camp constructions, as Zhang Yi was in charge of building new camps for the retreating Wei Yan. Then lastly, Zhuge Liang summons Zhang Ni and Ma Zhong and put them in charge of all the surrendered Nanman troops and reserves them for the later use. So with the Shu Han side all prepared, the Nanman side was also making plans, as Meng Huo shares some words of wisdom with Wu Tugu, warning him that Zhuge Liang is filled with tricks, so they need to be extra careful in battle, and especially don't over-pursue into ambushes, and avoid all bad terrain in forested areas, and just be cautious overall. But just as the two kings are talking, scouts report back that new encampments is being wrecked right off the river on the north bank. So Wu Tugu summons up his army and crosses the river to make an attack on the camp. Wei Yan, true to his word to the prime minister, offered little resistance as he retreated back after a short fight, and with Meng Huo's words fresh on his mind, Wu Tugu did not pursue. But the next day, scouts reported that Wei Yan did not retreat far and actually set up another camp, not so far away from the first one. So Wu Tugu once again made the crossing of the river for another assault, and the same thing happened as Wei Yan retreats again, farther and farther away from the river each day, but closer and closer to the mouth of the Coiled Snake Valley. And during these 15 days where Wei Yan lost exactly 15 battles, Wu Tugu made sure to be extra careful as he did not pursue and avoided all the forested areas nearby. But subconsciously, he was beginning to let his guard down. Then, on the 16th day, Wu Tugu arrived on the battlefield once again against Wei Yan, and after a quick fight, Wei Yan retreated into Coiled Snake Valley, which actually is a barren valley without any trees. So this time, after seeing the land, Wu Tugu charged his men into the valley to give pursuit. However, as Wu Tugu's men fully entered the valley, Wei Yan's force was nowhere to be seen, and a new Shu Han force now appeared overhead on the mountains above the valley and threw rocks to seal off the mouth of the valley, preventing Wu Tugu and his vine armor units from retreating. With no way back, Wu Tugu had to march his men forward, hoping to find an exit, and very soon they spot the 10 black carts resting harmlessly in the middle of the valley. Not sure what they wore, they moved up to inspect them. But just as they moved closer, torches were thrown down from the valley from the cliff above. At first, Tugu was not concerned because there are no vegetations inside the valley, so nothing could even catch fire. But then they noticed these black powders on the ground starting to spark and light up as they trailed towards the carts. It turns out these 10 black carts were filled with gunpowder, and Zhuge Liang had planned to use the explosion and fire to destroy the vine armored units, as traditional weapons proved useless against them. And since these vines were soaked in oil during their production, they should be highly flammable. And indeed, a huge boom rocked the valley as all 10 carts exploded, and King Tugu and his 30,000 vine armor units were engulfed in flame. And from atop of the cliff, overlooking and observing the valley, Zhuge Liang let a tear down his eyes as he lamented at the destruction down below, and put out a prayer for all those souls suffering. But such is the price of war, and other steps of the plan were now in action. So as the fire raged on inside the Coil Snake Valley, a group of Nanman troops reported back to Meng Huo that Tugu had scored a great victory, and that Zhuge Liang was now trapped inside the Coil Snake Valley, and Tugu has requested Meng Huo's presence along with some reinforcing units to celebrate their win. Delighted by this news, Meng Huo rallied his small force and ferried themselves across the Peach Blossom River, but when they had arrived near the Coil Snake Valley, they could spot the rising black smoke in the distance and the smell of flesh filling the air. Sensing that something is amiss, Meng Huo sounded the retreat, but only then did he realize that most of the Nanman troops that had come back were actually surrendered units who now served the Shu Han forces under the command of Zhang Ni and Ma Zhong. And as Meng Huo tried to fight his way out, Ma Dai's forces quickly arrived on scene to seal off any chance of escape, as Meng Huo was captured for a 7th time. And when Meng Huo was brought into the Shu Han camp this time, he was not presented to Zhuge Liang right away, as he was thrown into a makeshift prison. Very soon, Zhu Rong and the remaining forces who had remained behind inside of the Wuge kingdom were dragged into the prison as well, as Wang Ping and Zhang Yi took separate forces and made quick work of the remaining garrison there. But instead of meeting Zhuge Liang again, Meng Huo's group was provided food and wine as they awaited their fate. And by the time they finished their meal, a messenger had arrived and tells Meng Huo that Zhuge Liang will not be meeting him this time, and that they are free to go and fight another day. Meng Huo stops him short and requests to meet Zhuge Liang, as he had finally had enough. So Meng Huo was brought before Zhuge Liang, where he bent the knee and promised that his clan, for generations to come, will always serve the Shu Han court and never rebel again. Zhuge Liang smiles and helps Meng Huo up, as he informs him that Meng Huo will remain the king of the Nanman people, and the Shu Han government will not station any troops or place any governors to interfere with tribal affairs. Hearing this, Meng Huo is overjoyed, as he promises a large sum of tribute to help pay for the Shu Han campaign, and the two parties celebrate over another round of feast. The next day in camp, as the Shu Han forces made final preparations to depart back to Chengdu, Fei Yi enters Zhuge Liang's camp, asking why the prime minister decided on not stationing troops and an official to help monitor Meng Huo after such a difficult campaign. Zhuge Liang smiles and carefully explains, "First, if I leave an official, then I will be forced to leave troops to help enable his rule. But if I leave troops, then I must find a way to feed these troops and supply them. Right now, the Nanman people are shattered and broken after a war raged against us. Their families have lost fathers, brothers, and sons. They will not appreciate a foreign governor, nor will they be willing to supply and feed these foreign troops. And even if we think ahead to when peacetime returns and life goes back to normal, in any dispute among the tribes here, if we are the ones tasked with settling the conflict, then we are guaranteed to make at least one enemy. And even in the best outcome, I'm certain neither side will trust whomever we leave behind. So to prevent all these problems from happening in the first place, we need to trust Meng Huo. After all, we did spend so much effort to ensure that Meng Huo will never rebel again. So let us use that. and let him continue to rule over these lands for us. So, with that, our story comes to an end as Zhuge Liang's Nanman expedition concludes with 7 captures and 7 releases of Meng Huo. But our lore series still has one more episode tomorrow, as we will revisit the whole story from a historical lens and see what really happened in this campaign. So thank you all for watching, and see you then. Bye!